Berenice, written by Edgar Allan Poe, narrated by Ryan McKern.
Misery is manifold. The wretchedness of earth is multiform, overreaching the wide horizon like the rainbow. Its hues are various as the hues of that arch, as distinct too, yet as intimately blended, overreaching the wide horizon like the rainbow. How is it that from beauty I have derived a type of unloveliness? From the covenant of peace, the smile of sorrow. But thus it is, and as, in ethics, evil is a consequence of good. So, in fact, out of joy and sorrow born, either the memory of the past bliss is the anguish of today, or the agonies which have their origin in the ecstasies which might have been. I have a tale to tell, in its own essence rife with horror. I would suppose it were not a record more of feelings than of facts. My baptismal name is Berenice. Igius. That of my family I will not mention. Yet there are no towers in the land more time-honored than my gloomy, grey, hereditary halls. Our line has been called a race of visionaries, and in many striking particulars, in the character of the family mansion, in the frescoes of the chief saloon, in the tapestries of the dormitories, chiseling of some businesses in the armory, but more especially in the gallery of antique paintings, in the fashion of the library chamber, and lastly, in the very particular nature of the library's contents. There is more than sufficient evidence to warrant the belief. The recollections of my earliest years are connected with that chamber, and with its volumes, of which latter I will say no more. Here died my mother, herein was I born. But it is mere idleness to say that I had not lived before, that the soul has no previous existence. You deny it. Let us not argue in the matter. Convince myself I seek not to convince. There is, however, a remembrance of aerial forms, of spiritual meaning, eyes, of sounds musical yet sad. A remembrance will not be excluded. A memory like a shadow, vague, variable, indefinite, unsteady, and like a shadow too, in the impossibility of getting rid of it. While the sunlight my reason shall exist. In that chamber was I born, thus awaking, as it were, from the long night of what seemed, but was not, nonentity, at once into the very regions of fairyland, into a palace of imagination, to the wild dominions of monastic thought and erudition. It is not singular that I gazed around me with a startled and ardent eye, that I loitered away my boyhood in books, and dissipated my youth in reverie. But it's singular that as years rolled away, and the noon of manhood found me still in the mansion of my fathers. It is wonderful what stagnation there fell upon the springs of my life. Wonderful how total an inversion took place in the character of my common thoughts. The realities of the world affected me as visions, and as visions only, while the wild ideas of the land of dreams became, turn, not the material of my everyday existence, but in very deed, that existence utterly and solely in itself. Berenice and I were cousins, and we grew up together in my parental halls yet differently we grew. I ill of health and buried in gloom, she agile, graceful, and overflowing with energy. Here the ramble on the hillside, mine the studies of the cloister. I living within my own heart, and addicted body and soul to the most intense and painful meditation. She roaming carelessly through life, with no thought of the shadows in her path, or the silent flight of the raven-winged hours. Berenice, I call upon her name, Berenice, and from the grey ruins of a memory, 1,000 tumultuous recollections are startled at the sound. Vividly is her image before me now, as in the early days of her lightheartedness and joy. Oh, gorgeous yet fantastic beauty! Oh, sylph amid the shrubberies of Arnheim! Oh, naiad among her fountains! And then, all is mystery and terror. In a tale which should not be told, disease, a fatal disease, fell like the simoon upon her frame, and even while I gazed upon her, the spirit of change swept over her, pervading her mind, her habits, and her character, and in a manner the most subtle and terrible, disturbing even the very identity of her person. Alas, the destroyer came and went, and the victim, where was she? I knew her not, or knew her no longer as Berenice. Among the numerous train of maladies superinduced by that fatal and primary one which effected a revolution of so horrible, a kind in the moral and physical being of my cousin may be mentioned as the most distressing and obstinate in its nature, a species of epilepsy, not unfrequently terminating in trance itself, trance very nearly resembling positive dissolution, and from which her manner of recovery was, in most instances, startling, abrupt. In the meantime, my own disease, for I had been told that I should call it by no other appellation, my own disease, then grew rapidly upon me, and aggravated in the symptoms by the immoderate use of opium, assumed, finally, a monomanic character of a novel and extraordinary form, hourly and momentarily gaining vigor, and at length obtaining over me the most singular and incomprehensible ascendancy. The monomania, if I must so term it, consisted in a morbid irritability of the nerves immediately affecting those properties of the mind, in metaphysical science termed the attentive. It is more than probable I am not understood, but I fear that it's indeed no manner possible to convey to the mind of the merely general reading an adequate idea of that nervous intensity of interest with which my case, powers of meditation, not to speak technically, busied and it were buried themselves in the contemplation of even the most common objects of the universe, to muse for long unwearied hours, with my attention riveted to some frivolous device upon the margin, or in the typography of a book, to become absorbed for the better part of a summer's day in a quaint shadow, falling aslant upon the tapestry, or upon the floor, to lose myself for an entire night in watching the steady flame of a lamp, or the embers of a fire, to dream away whole days with the perfume of a flower, to repeat monotonously some common word, till the sound, frequent repetition, ceased to convey any idea whatever to the mind, to lose all sense of motion or physical existence in a state of absolute bodily quiescence, long and obstinately preserved in. Such were a few of the most common and least pernicious vagaries induced by condition of the mental faculties, not indeed altogether unparalleled, but certainly biting defiance to anything like analysis or explanation. Yet let me not be misapprehended. The undue, intense, and morbid attention thus excited my objects in their own nature, frivolous, must not be confounded in character with that ruminating propensity common to all mankind, and more especially indulged in my persons of ardent imagination. By no means, it was not even, as might be at first supposed, an extreme condition or exaggeration of such propensity, but primarily and essentially distinct and different. In the one instance, the dreamer or the enthusiast, being interested by an object usually not frivolous, imperceptibly loses sight of the object in a wilderness, deductions and suggestions issuing therefrom until, at the conclusion of a day, dream often replete with luxury, he finds the insentimentum or first cause of his musings utterly vanished and forgotten. In my case, the primary object was invariably frivolous, although assuming through the medium of my distempered vision a refracted and unreal importance, few deductions, if any, were made. And those few, partitiously returning in, so to speak, upon the original object of the center. The meditations were never pleasurable, and the termination of the reverie, the first cause, so far from being out of sight, had attained that supernaturally exaggerated interest which was the prevailing feature of the disease. In a word, the powers of mind more particularly exercised were, with me, as I have said before, the attentive, and are, with the daydreamer, the speculative.
Thank you very much for watching and listening. Please stay tuned for part 2. Subscribe, like, and share. Merci beaucoup. I'm your host, Ryan McKern, and this has been another Readings with McKern. Au revoir.